Hi, everybody. It's Tim Rowan with another episode of Meet the CEO. As you know, I'm the editor and publisher of Home Care Technology, the Rowan Report, and I'm very, very happy today to welcome Emmet O'Gara. Emmet is the CEO of Sandata. And Sandata, as you know, has been around a long time. Most of you are very familiar with their products and services, but Mr. O'Gara has been with us since last fall, so he's relatively new to Sandata, and I want to give you a chance to get to know him. So, Emmet O'Gara, welcome to Meet the CEO.
Thank you, Tim. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start out with the way I usually do in these interviews, and that is, in your position, what do you see coming? What would be your prediction for the future of our industry across the board? I know that Sandata focuses mostly on Medicaid, but the entire post-acute industry, from hospice to palliative to Medicare services, I'm sure that you have had corporate meetings where you look forward to what's coming and try to prepare for it. So what do you see?
Sure. Tim, it's interesting. When we look at the post-acute care space, there's a couple of different ways that we look at it. One is the concept of kind of having a tightly integrated spectrum of care as individuals either age through the system, or as individuals age through the risk spectrum. The type of care they need could be different, but the experience should be consistent. And that means getting the best care, the right care at the right time to create the best possible outcome, regardless of where an individual sits in that spectrum. So if that means individuals need basic care, home care, meals, baths, trips to appointments, or they need something a little bit more intensive, infusion therapy or things of that nature, or they, unfortunately, they're at end of life and they need hospice care. We want to create a consistent, integrated experience, focusing on that individual and focusing on the outcome. So that's one way that we look at the future, is leveraging technology and data to create that spectrum of care consistently for an individual. Secondly, I look at this piece of the industry, and this is a little bit of my background, the way that we've looked at population health for commercial populations, and it now is starting to bleed into the Medicaid population more, which is wonderful, as whole health care. And what I mean by that is these things, these activities that we perform, in the home, those really basic activities. Let's take those for example. Making sure an individual has food in their fridge, or can take personal hygiene and can have assistance with personal hygiene, things like that, contribute to the actual clinical health of that individual. And they're great indicators too of future potential adverse events. So if we start thinking about individuals in their entirety, and that we play a key role in that profile of an individual, we can affect the clinical outcome, even with non-clinical services. And so that's where I think that the biggest opportunity for us is, either as a trading partner of information. So we're collecting all kinds of great information on behalf of our clients, whether they're states or providers or managed care organizations, and integrating that with a clinical profile to look at the whole health of an individual and hopefully predict any future adverse events and interact before those happen. That's when it gets really exciting. I think that's when we can make a market impact on certainly the health of that population, but most, also important, on the overall cost of the individual if we can hit off some of the adverse events. So that's where we're looking and investing and thinking about as we think into the future, moving away from some of the really basic things that we have to do that I think we do better than anybody else in the world, which is helping agencies manage, their payroll and their scheduling and recruiting and retaining staff. That's critical and that's important. But can we take that one step further and say that, hey, there's great data that we can capture. We're in homes. We have social determinant of health questions that we can ask and collect information on, and those can be very, very valuable in understanding what's likely to happen. So that's the thing I think I'm most excited about.
You make it sound like the whole comprehensive in-home care is more than just health care. You're talking about meals and keeping the person active. Tell me a little bit about how Sandata helps with that. The data part, I understand. The more data we have, the more the ability to more accurately predict likely events in a person's future. But what we've a lot of people still all have, like myself, always thought of Sandata as an EVV company, but you have a number of products. Why don't you go and tell us how your product line relates to the needs that you have just said are coming within the elderly population that we all serve.
Sure. And it's funny when you bring up EVV. It's as many of your listeners and readers probably already know, we patented the first EVV technology. So we are closely associated with EVV, but I will tell you that we're a lot more than just EVV. EVV is something that we do better than anybody in the world. I 100% stand by that. And we've built a business on that, but we also know that is one piece of a complex puzzle when it comes to serving the needs of post-acute care populations. And so, whether it's the investments we've made in our agency platforms, which yes, help you accommodate EVV, but do so much more. And where we're highly focused now is on the mostly on the retention of caregivers, given the crisis that we have in terms of keeping caregivers engaged and employed in our agency so they can serve those populations. What we can do with the managed care organizations, I mentioned, you mentioned data is a key component of that. But also, having an individual in a home able to do things like ask SDO, social determinant of health survey questions is so important. I came out of an organization that focused on population health and used digital interactions to try to gather this type of information. But one thing we always knew is we could never be as effective as those individuals that are at the point of care, actually interacting with whether you call it a patient or a member. And so for us to be able to complete that last mile is incredibly powerful for our partners. So I think that beyond the data, and we've started doing this with some of our customers now at the state level, collecting that SDOH information and sharing our data with their data sets to create a whole health experience is really been a huge lift for us in our profile and trying to elevate ourselves out of just, not that there's anything wrong with just being EVV, but we have higher aspirations. So being more than just the EVV vendor, but being really the whole health, home health vendor is where we're going.
You mentioned the phrase where I've come from before. I wonder if it would be okay if I gave you an opportunity to tell my audience what your background is, because you're new to home care, and a couple of your predecessors have been around a while, and people got to know them. In fact, sometimes on the stage in various state and national conference speaking engagements. So bring us up to date on your background.
Sure, happy to. So one thing I tell folks, obviously taking over as the CEO of a technology company in the healthcare space, I get the question a lot: are you a technologist? And I would say I'm a healthcare person first and a technologist second. I've been working with all sorts of healthcare entities for now nearing 30 years. I've worked within health plans. I had senior roles with both Cigna Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. I've led healthcare organizations focused on mostly analytics and population health. So a couple of those examples are Medi Analytics and HMS Healthcare. And I come from a family of healthcare professionals. My grandfather was a physician. He's passed on. My sister's now a CEO of a hospital, but she's a registered nurse. And my nephews and my brother-in-law are all pharmacists. So I think it's in my blood. I'm not clinical, so I found my path. But, we have that similar goal of helping people. And for me, what really motivated me to take on this role at Sandata is, we serve the most vulnerable populations in the U.S. There's no doubt about it. The folks that are accessing our services ultimately, not the buyers, but the individuals that are being cared for are the most vulnerable. And honestly, some of our buyers are in relatively vulnerable places too. And they're doing it often, while this is still a business, out of the goodness of their heart. You don't get into home health and home care if you don't have a mission-driven focus. There's just too many other ways to make money in healthcare, frankly. You have to really believe in the mission and why it's so important. So I thought, hey, here's a great opportunity to join an organization that's been around for 40 years. As I said, invented EVV, has a robust suite of customers in the state Medicare, Medicaid business, as well as several thousand agencies that use our technology, and dozens of MCOs that use our technology. So you had a great footprint, and I'm coming in with a background heavily focused on analytics and population health, looking at how do we make things better by leveraging data and by creating technologies that make the healthcare system work better together. That's really been my focus for the last 2 decades at least. And I'm so excited with what we've already accomplished at Sandata, but much more excited about what we're likely to accomplish next. And those are some of the things we just talked about around, how do we create a better outcome? How do we create better health outcomes for our population, not just ensure kind of the fidelity of the program, which is what EVV does often, but truly take that one step further and say, could we materially impact both the cost of care and the quality of care delivered? And that's pretty exciting stuff.
Well, with your background coming from both hospitals and payers in your career, you have a perspective that I'd like to explore for a second. You see what in-home care can do, regardless of who the payer is. You understand about how it actually can lower the overall cost of care. And you also probably have seen the way hospitals are discharging people to home care sooner and much more frail than they used to. So we're being asked to do more.
Yeah.
So when you insert technology into that equation, you always have compassionate caregivers. You always have qualified clinicians that, like you said, are more mission-driven than business-driven. What are you doing with what you see coming over the next 3 to 5 years? What does Sandata plan to help them with that mission?
Yeah, I think the number one thing we can do is create a truly a kind of a frictionless experience, and you do that by really focusing on the user experience of technology. At the end of the day, we're a technology provider, and we don't provide care, but we provide the tools that allow folks to provide care in a better manner. And so, really focusing, I think, candidly, and coming into this industry and looking at both Sandata and our competitors, utility was probably the big focus, really. We want to make sure it worked, and that's important. That's critically important. But I'm not sure enough attention was paid to the end users and how do you create a better experience for them. And the way I explain it to my team, and I do think it resonates internally at Sandata, is, these are people that are overwhelmed. They are asked to do, in my opinion, honestly, one of the harder things that you can do, which is, enter an individual's home that may or may not even want you there, because often there is some resistance, right? A feeling of independence and pride and things of that nature. Help them with essential, critical things that, again, that they often feel they can do themselves. You're doing that in a time when the pay often is not adequate, where you're in an economy that has obviously the Great Resignation, all kinds of opportunities, people jumping to different jobs. So there's opportunity to do other things. So now you're in a difficult roles. Hopefully that, your mission sense is keeping you engaged in it, but there's other opportunities. Do I want technology to also be difficult? I mean, that should be the easiest thing. That should be the thing that you don't even have to think about, that works. And in Sandata, we actually have been kind of pushing this out into the organization. When people ask me, what do you want people to think about Sandata? I just want them to say it works. That's it. It just works. It works for me. I don't have to think about it. I don't honestly, my marketing team's going to kill me, but I don't care if they even know our name because it works. They're not talking about, oh boy, Sandata, I have to, worry about hitting a button twice to make it. That's not us. That's not who we want to be. That's not who we should be. We should make sure that, yes, everything behind the scenes is powerful and leveraging new technology and leveraging data and analytics and AI and machine learning, excuse me, all the things that you want to create, an innovative experience. But for that user of our technology, I want to feel like it works. And so that's a heavy focus for us. And that's a focus I've used in other parts of healthcare as well. I think it's key that while we have leveraged technology incredibly in healthcare in especially the last 10 years, we used to lag so far behind. I had colleagues in other industries that would say, why in the world are you working in healthcare? It's because we want to make it better, right? It's so important. It has really, the adoption of innovative technology has really increased over the last decade or more. So, from that standpoint, we're getting there. But I also want to make sure that we're adopting some of the other consumer experiences that individuals are now getting used to and assuming they'll have in terms of shopping or booking a flight or whatever you want to say. Make sure that we're applying that user experience to healthcare as well.
The clinicians do pay attention to that and can be vocal about it. That reminds me of when my father was in hospice and the nurse came every few days. We got to talking and he found out who I was. And so he said, come here, I got to show you this. Look what I have to do to make this computer work. I have to do this. I have to do this. This, by the way, was not a Sandata customer. but
Thank you.
But he couldn't wait to show me just how difficult the technology made his work life. And so the effort to streamline the work for people turns out to be a recruiting and retention activity as much as a technology and caregiving activity.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up. I was just in a conversation with our product folks, and we're trying to attack the recruiting retention issue. I think that's the number one issue that our agency clients bring up, is how can I keep my folks employed and willing to stay with it, and then how can I attract new talent? And I think that one of the things that we're talking about is how do we make So I just went from saying I don't want people to even know our name because it works, but how do we make working with agencies that leverage the type of technology that we're pushing out aspirational? How do we make that a differentiator? It's kind of the way that we used to look. I mean, this if you think about um, and this is an extreme example, but you think about why do we have employer-sponsored healthcare in the first place, right? It became an aspirational benefit, years and years ago that would differentiate, decisions on what kind of organization to work for. Well, could technology do the same
Yes.
thing, right? Could being able to leverage cutting edge technology that made my life better, um, got the agency paid faster, so make sure that I get paid on time. Anything we can do to impact that is important to us. Making it intuitive is really critical. Making sure that there's training or just-in-time assistance available through technology is really important to keeping people maintaining keeping people employed at these agencies. So that's a really heavy focus. That's a very astute comment that you made, Tim, because it's so important to how can we leverage technology in ways that we probably didn't necessarily think about a few years ago, but now it's becoming much more critical.
Well, there's a network out there. Word of mouth is powerful.
Yeah,
Nurses, therapists, non-medical type caregivers, they know each other and they talk to each other. And if somebody says, I love the technology or I hate the technology they make me use at work, that has an impact on how many applicants you have knocking on your door. So tell me then, you mentioned that Sandata is working in this direction to um, enable your customers, to enable all of home care to, I know it's a cliche, but do more with less,
yeah.
to serve the population that's reaching 65 at the rate of 10,000 or more per day. So can you kind of go through, before we run out of time, your product list and explain by name the offerings that you have for the industry?
Sure, sure. So, we try to keep it simple, and there's a lot of complexity within those products. So, the first example of that would be our Sandata Agency Management Platform, which we've titled SAM, and it is a robust agency management platform used by home health agencies, home care, as well as IDD, and it handles, as I might have mentioned earlier in the discussion, everything from it has some components that'll help enhance recruitment and retention. Um, as far as running the agency, certainly it handles all the EVV, which is so important to get right, especially as more and more states now are enforcing compliance. It's become critical to getting paid on time, that you have a robust EVV solution in your agency. It handles all your billing, all your HR back office functionality, all your scheduling. So really a integrated, all-encompassing agency management platform. And that's our most used piece of technology in, I believe it's about 18,000 provider agencies across the country use SAM or a generation of SAM in their agencies. For our state EVV, something that we're really proud of, if you think about state EVV, we've had some state clients for several years, the early adopters and things of that nature, but with the Cures Act, we accelerated our efforts. Our state EVV solution is used now in 22 states. We're really proud of that. No competitor comes close. I think the next closest competitor might have 3 states. We've been CMS certified in, I think, 12 of those 22. And again, this is another one where, to give you a sense of scale, I think the next closest competitor might have 2 states certified. So we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do there. And of course, as more and more states come into line and offer, either put out to RFP or even in some cases still waiting to adopt EVV, because there were some that chose to hold out and pay the fines until until now. We expect that to continue to grow, and we're investing heavily in that side of our business as well. That's an area where we believe our analytics will be a real difference maker too. We've made investments in analytics. I actually brought over my old chief analytics officer from HMS over to Sandata, and he's doing some wonderful work on both the fraud side of home health, but also on some other really exciting ways of integrating data that state Medicaid would collect that we don't have access to, and supplementing it with information that we collect on the behalf of the state that they don't necessarily house, and doing some really wonderful analysis there. And then lastly, what we do for MCOs, it's not, certainly working with MCOs to make sure that we can integrate, with the states, with the providers, and then do the claims matching that, every claim has a visit, a verified visit associated with it, so that those clean claims can be paid and then, of course, reimbursed by the state. All of those encompass our suite of our macro suite of products, and we have several additional products that are value added to our customers. So we're proud that we serve basically the three legs of the stool in home health and home care, the MCOs, the states, and the providers. We believe that that investment in analytics is going to be a big difference maker for us. And I think just bringing in those basic population health principles that I mentioned earlier will also lead to where this company is going in the future. So we don't want to lose sight of our core. I think that's really important. I've seen organizations that do that. They get so intoxicated by the future that they forget about what built them. We're not going to do that. We're very proud of what we've built to date, and we're going to continue to enhance that. But at the same time, we'll continue to supplement. So for us, it's not an or, it's an and that's our focus going forward.
One last thing.
Sure.
I try to get as much information in as I can in a short amount of time, but because I know people are busy. But there's going to be an expansion of the EVV mandate to include home health. You mentioned home health in your list of segments of the industry that you serve, and I'm just curious. Unless it's postponed, the EVV mandate is set through the Cures Act to expand to include Medicare home health providers.
Yes.
Are you developing a plan for that? Since I know traditionally you have not focused a lot on the Medicare side of the business. So what's coming at Sandata for that?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, it's more than a plan now, because it's coming on January 1st, and it's only a few months away. We've actually been implementing our home health EVV solution on behalf of our clients throughout this year. Many are live already in anticipation of 1/1. We have several others that are going live, in the next month or two. So we're, from a product standpoint, we're already there. And we were pleased to see that most of our customers, even though there was a waiver offered, most of our customers saw the value in implementing this on time, on the original timeline, versus seek the waiver and delay. So that tells us a lot. That tells us that we've done a good job in the past, that the value that we believe EVV drives is being shown, and that that they're trusting of us to stand this up. So we take a lot of pride in all of our customers, and certainly the ones that have decided to stand up home health with us. Often they're home care customers that have become home health customers, but in some cases they're coming to us just for home health. So that's a huge testament to the reputation of Sandata, and we're proud of that.
Well, that brings up one last thing.
Sure.
As Medicare moves into Medicare home health moves into this realm that you've been working in for years, I had this discussion with your predecessor about various models of implementing EVV. The state has been given its own decision-making power, whether it's going to mandate a vendor or leave it up to the individual providers, leave it up to the MCOs, and that's going to be different in home health. Out of all of the models that you've seen, and I know that some work and some don't, I just recently had
Yeah,
a long conversation with some Florida providers who were angry enough to be writing letters to the state to get them to change the bad decision that they had made.
sure,
But
sure.
when we get into Medicare, um, the, that's going to kind of change the equation. Do you still think that there is one particular model out of the 4 or 5 that are out there that is ideal?
Well, we at Sandata believe in an open model where providers can choose,
Mhm.
where MCOs choose. Obviously the state or the federal government has, that's not much. That's a very binary choice. But beyond that, we believe the open model is the right model. And some of that is we have a lot of confidence that we're going to be the selected vendor, that we provide the best solution. But more importantly, again, I think when we've seen the closed models and the difficulty that can cause a provider, often they have to, we've had providers that have been in closed models that have tried to live with 2 systems. I mean,
Ah,
that's not efficient, and that's not.
yeah.
And think about that. Think about the fact that we're taking this individual, and as I talked about before, this is the last thing they need to be dealing with. But because of either their own business processes or their loyalty or affinity to their legacy solution, or some other reason that I can't think of, they're choosing to live in a world of 2 models versus just go with the mandated. And that tells you why an open model is better. They shouldn't have to even contemplate that type of decision. They should be allowed to make their own choice for what's best for them and best for their people and best for their processes. So we're heavily advocating for an open model.
And again, it's going to have an impact on retention if the staff
Of
gets
course it is.
frustrated with having to log into 2 different systems, or as someone told me last week, uh, when the MCO gets to choose, the caregiver goes into the home and has to log in to the correct EVV system based on the pay.
It can become,
The caregiver doesn't care who the person's, or doesn't want to
right.
know
Yeah.
who's paying the bill, and that's probably the worst of all possible worlds. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear
It
you say
really
that
shouldn't be. Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
was going to
yeah,
say, a care
it should
provider
be.
should never have to deal with us making it difficult. Us,
Yeah,
us being the general population or the legislature or the whatever you want to be, the us, but it's not their
yeah.
fault we made it difficult. We really shouldn't be doing that. We should be thinking,
Mhm.
if I could leave us with one thought, it's always, whenever you're in healthcare, if you're not thinking about that individual that's receiving the care. So I don't care where you are on this, in the chain, right? I don't care if you're the government. I don't care if you're a payer, health plan, whatever. Obviously, if you're a provider, it might be a little different. If you're not thinking about that individual and all the things that go on with being in the system, the fear of that, the uncertainty of that, um, the fact that we're talking about human lives, and I'm not saying that everybody, it's quality of life, it's all kinds of different things. If that's not what you're thinking about, you're in the wrong business. I 100% believe that. If you lose sight of that, I encourage any individual that's watching this, if you're losing sight of that, there's other things to do that are probably a lot easier, because that's the most important thing. But often we do lose sight of it, or we make short-sighted decisions, or we think we know best, but that's, yeah, I don't know. I think that I've most of my career I've tried to remember that what we do, it doesn't matter where you are, what we do ultimately impacts a human being. So think about that.
Well, I can't think of a better way to close. That thought is the one that we want to leave people with. So
Oh,
I can't think of anything else except to thank you very much, Emmet O'Gara, CEO of Sandata, for spending this time with us on this episode of Meet the CEO. People can get in touch with you, of course. The website is just simply sandata.com, correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
And you can get in touch with me through my website, homecaretechreport.com, and that's where you can sign up for your free subscription to my newsletter. I'll put a couple of phone numbers at the end of this recording so that if you want to contact me immediately, you can do that too. So once again, Emmet O'Gara, thank you very, very much for spending this time with us.
Tim, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
My name's Tim Rowan. This has been Meet the CEO. Thank you too for joining us, and we'll see you next time.